The Iron Game Chalk Talk podcast is brought to you by the following sponsors: EliteForm.com, IgnitionAPG.com, PlayUSA at PLAEUSA.com, and Sorinex Exercise Equipment at Sorinex.com. And now, the Iron Game Chalk Talk podcast. Welcome to Iron Game Chalk Talk with your host, Ron McKeefery.
Every time our athletes walk into this weight room, they're going to be pushed to the max.
Let's go! Everything you got!
On this podcast, hear Coach McKeefery straight talk about training, featuring the top strength and conditioning professionals from around the world. And now, here's your host, Ron McKeefery.
Hey guys, welcome back to Iron Game Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Ron McKeefery, and this is episode number 102. Iron Game Chalk Talk is a weekly podcast where I bring you experts in the field to talk shop. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes, YouTube, or join the mailing list at ronmckeefery.com to stay up to date with the latest guest and anything else that I have going on. This week, excited to have a buddy of mine, Loren Landow, on the show. Loren is an elite level strength and conditioning coach. He based himself out at Steadman Hawkins Clinic out in Denver, but he works with elite level athletes across the board: NFL, Major League Baseball, NHL, Olympic athletes, and the UFC. And you know, I've got a chance to really get to know Loren through the years with watching him speak. And if you have not heard him speak or gone to one of his presentations, they are fantastic. He does a great job, really has a good way about himself. Getting complicated information out there in a way that you can digest it. And so I'm excited to bring him on the show. We talk a little bit about the NFL Combine and the direction that's headed. We talk about, deceleration training really is kind of one of the things he's most well known for. And then get into a little bit about, he's gotten into the UFC, was on The Ultimate Fighter as a strength coach, and has just done really just has a job that we all freaking would love to have, working with the elite across the board. And so I know you're going to get a ton out of this episode. Before we do, I want to make sure we recognize all of our sponsors. We have IgnitionAPG.com, Sorinex.com, EliteForm.com, and of course PlayUSA.com. And Play, if you've gone to any of these clinics, we're all at the conference right now. This is going up on the 7th, and so we're all at the CSCCA conference. And the one thing I would ask is make sure you go by all of our sponsors' booths and thank them for helping support the show and bring that to everybody for free. But Play has been with me from the beginning and has done a fantastic job. And not only do they sponsor our show, but they're at all the clinics right now. They're a big part of the Hammer Strength series, the different clinics that they're putting on. I know they did the Elite Summit with Joe Ken and Mike Robertson recently. I just ran into him not too long ago at the Southeast NSCA clinic. And so it's a company that's really in it to help the strength coach. And, they have the best product out there by far, in my opinion, in terms of sports flooring. And so if you're in the market for it, make sure you reach out to them. But, they are a great resource, not just from a sports flooring standpoint, but Rich and Brett and Brittany and Dave and everybody and Jet and all the guys over there, they just do a fantastic job of being an ear for the strength coach, a resource for the strength coach. And so I get real excited just talking to them and seeing what's going on and talking to them about other rooms and things like that. And so, they're redoing Florida State's right now. Georgia's room's going in pretty quick. And so I would encourage you to reach out to them, if for nothing else, just to talk a little shop with them. But like I said, if you're in the market for flooring right now, there's no one better by far. Lastly, Strength Coach Basic Training. So I get a lot of people requesting to join Strength Coach Basic Training. This is not a free page. It is a product that I created a couple years back. It's basically the 8 lectures that I give our interns, and I created it because a lot of people would want to come down, but they couldn't afford to make that sacrifice to come down and go through a whole semester internship. So there is cost associated with putting something online and all this type of stuff. So it's a really cheap product, but it is geared towards the entry-level strength coach, someone that's just getting in the field or maybe at a place where they don't have a whole lot of a network to bounce ideas off each other. And so we have all the lectures over here in the about section here, all the different checkpoints. There's assignments and projects that go along with each one. There's bonuses, manuals, different things you can go there. It is a community. There's over 160 people in it. And, we support each other. I mean, we just had, Noah here just got his first job. So he's excited about that and felt like the program really helped contribute to that and contribute to that. We share all the different things out there, projects and videos and things like that. So it really is a cool resource for coaches that maybe don't have the network yet, but they're looking for other like-minded individuals to be able to interact with. And so go to strengthcoachbasictraining.com, sign up, request to join the group. I'll put you in the group. And, like I said, I haven't had anybody feel like it wasn't well worth their time or money. So appreciate you guys checking it out. Don't want to take anything else away from Loren's episode. Sit back, take lots of notes in this one. I took several pages, and I'll see you on the other side. All right, guys, welcome back to Iron Game Chalk Talk. Excited, super excited to have Loren Landow with us. Loren's a buddy of mine, and just a guy that I've respected from afar for an extremely long time and doing some great things in the industry. And so wanted to have him on the show, wanted to get into some speed training and his business and things along those lines. But, man, just really an honor to have you on the show, brother.
Thank you. Honestly, it's an honor to be on the show.
That's awesome, man. Well, hey, buddy, let's get into it, man. How did you get into this field in the first place, and kind of how's that path kind of taking you where you're currently at?
I'm glad you asked that question because my path is different than most. I came out of school and I did my internship in cardiac rehab, and I went the cardiac and pulmonary rehab route first. And I probably spent about 2 months doing that as a profession, and it was quickly pointed out to me that it was an uphill battle a lot of times. A majority of the people really didn't want to make the lifestyle changes to get better, to get healthy, and their life depended on it, yet they weren't making the necessary changes. So from there, I realized I had to find a more motivated population where I could really give what I can give and get it back in return from the clientele. And so I ran into a gentleman who was doing what I would consider today performance enhancement work, 20 plus years ago.
Right.
He was a track coach who was working with high-level athletes, and I was like, that's what I want to do. So I shadowed him. I shadowed him day and night. I was trying to build a clientele in the personal training world, but more so I wanted to shadow him and just see what it was he was doing. And, from there, it really got me motivated, kind of ignited the spark, if you will. And from there, I just started, furthering my education, seeking out, some of what I feel some of the best mentors that I've found between, Stephen Plisk, Dan Paff, Lauren Seagrave, Tom Purvis, and Greg Roscoff. I sought out these different mentors to learn the body more in-depthly, but to ultimately learn this holistic vision of performance enhancement. And the unique thing about those mentors is, those names, they're not all in the same field.
Right.
And so what I ultimately have tried to do, and I'm still trying to do, is see how they've had success in their embodiment of work and find how I can cultivate it and blend it into my line of work.
Absolutely. Well, talk a little bit about that. You talk about the holistic vision of performance enhancement. I mean, how would you say that separates from what maybe you see out there right now?
Well, whether right, wrong, or indifferent, I'm a movement-first practitioner. And when I say movement, I'm not like, we're going to do these functional triplanar lunges. I mean movement when it comes down to how we locomote the body on the field of play or on the court. And to me, it's we need to master that piece of equipment, master that machinery before we master everything else that we can, put our budgets into on the equipment side.
Absolutely.
So to me, it comes down to really just teaching the athlete how to have better body awareness. And that could be just through their warm-up patterns, static positional holds, a lot of times, Coach, you've seen it as well, where you ask a kid to squat and he doesn't even know what direction he needs to be facing when he squats. There's some people that just have a disconnect. Well, my goal is to create a connection of mind and body, if you will, on the field of play and teach them the accountability. I always say I want my athletes to learn how to leverage their levers about their center of mass. And that simply means, how do I best use the leverage components of my limbs to control where my center of mass is to best propel me to the direction I need to go next.
Sure.
And you hit on that earlier, is deceleration is kind of the key cog in all of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's I was going to get into that as well, is when you're talking about just the body, or you're taking yourself out of the weight room and all these toys and all these different speed gadgets and things along those lines, it's not really as sexy as maybe some of these things that you see, especially this time of year with the combine and things like that. How do you motivate, such a high level of clientele without all the gadgets and just say, hey, look, this really comes down to you being able to move with your body, be able to stop and change directions and produce force.
No, you're absolutely right, and I do find that there's a little pushback at first when I'm introducing my methods or my philosophies to a new client. Somebody, look at these athletes; they've had a tremendous amount of success already.
Absolutely.
Who am I to come in here and say, well, you don't move really as well as you think you do? But what happens is, as I start to show them and as I start to demonstrate it myself, I think the light bulb tends to go on. I'm a firm believer. I think some people like to dumb it down to the athletes, and I'm quite the opposite. I want to find out who you are and how much you're willing to be taught.
Sure.
From there, I will explain to you why this is going to matter, why the weight distribution on an outside leg, on the outside leg, inside edge of the foot is going to matter when we go to change direction. And I feel once you really you lay down the rationale, you show them, then they start, you expedite the learning process, because now they understand why. I'm not just yelling at you for the sake of it. I'm actually telling you why. Mm. But the cool thing is, particularly in the combine time, where I have 6 to 8 week window, I can get the buy-in quickly, because once I do get the buy-in, the athletes will make a improper movement, weight distribution, acceleration step, and they'll slip. When an athlete's out of position, they slip.
Right. And
it has nothing to do with their cleat wear. It has nothing to do with the surface they're on. It has everything to do with what leg they think should be locomoting them, or where their weight distribution is relative to the direction they're going next. So the cool part is, I'll start asking my guys when they say, tell me what happened. And 9 times out of 10, they'll be able to say, yeah, I had too much weight on the outside leg. I didn't have enough weight over here. I tried to accelerate off the back leg, and they'll start to tell me. And so that I want to make sure that I'm not dumbing it down, because I think that's how we get the best transfer, is if they truly understand the why.
I couldn't agree with you more. When I talk to people, and I've coached in the NFL and I've coached in a major college and those types of things, and people often ask me, what's the biggest difference between a pro athlete and a collegiate athlete, or a collegiate athlete and a high school athlete? And it really is just a more informed consumer. Somebody that's had success with doing various different training programs, kind of has an idea what they think works for them, and then they're gathering information about where they feel like they're deficient. And that's what causes them to seek out experts, and they're looking for that. And I think a lot of coaches, what they do is they feel that, like you said, they got to dumb things down or to just get them through, or and really the great ones are the ones that are able to put the complex simplistic.
Right. I struggle with that one at times too.
That's
now,
right.
I want to go back to your point, though, talking about the gadgetry that we see as well when it comes to speed training. And kind of my current philosophy, as you know, our philosophies tend to evolve a little bit over time. But my current philosophy is that there's a neurological process, and that's me kind of, teaching the mechanics and the technique of sprint movement or multi-directional movement with the deceleration emphasis. But then there's the physiological. And to me, the neurological is teaching a lot of the technique and the movement awareness, and then the physiological is ultimately what we do in the weight room. So basically saying, okay, I have this great chassis of a car. Now let's put the high-performance engine in it with the weight room.
Right.
Now, a lot of times what I see is people will take a beat-up VW and just say, okay, we're going to put that supercharger in that VW body.
Right.
And I want to make sure that we're complementary. We're making it a win-win outcome, is that we're teaching one the technical component, but then we're also feeding it the physiological need. And now you have this beautiful Ferrari chassis, and now you've got the engine to match it.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And that's, unfortunately, that's where, very rarely do you deal with an athlete that is 100% healthy, and when you're assessing these combine athletes, and when they come through and you got a short window and you can't maybe change the frame or the chassis all that much in that 6 weeks, what are some of the first things that you're doing to kind of get them, aligned correctly and positioned correctly and doing it in a way that's, again, sexy, that they stay bought in?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. All these kids are coming in with some sort of acute or chronic injury from the season. Nobody walks away from their collegiate season healthy. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm looking at a kid with a 6 to 8 window, I know I've got a couple of jobs I've got to do. I've got to get him fast and explosive so he can test his best. But then I need to also, eradicate some of these injury patterns that maybe he's had, maybe for a short amount of time, or maybe for, ever since his high school career. So you have to start unpeeling the onion. One thing that I do is my warm-up itself becomes my movement screen, if you will. I'm looking at symmetries, I'm looking at postural awareness, I'm looking at, how well can they extend the hips, how well can they stack from the ear all the way down to the ankle. And that tells me a lot. If you see a kid who's always dumped down, there's a good chance that they've got some growing issues, hip flexor issues, back issues. Right. And so what I do is I start using I reset my foundation for all my athletes with my warm-up. And it's my corrective exercises, if you will. 15, 20 minutes before we get rolling, we're slow and we're deliberate in certain aspects of our warm-up. And then, after we get through all the postural restoration type work, then we get into the more locomotion strategies. But it takes time. I always tell my interns or any of my assistant coaches who help me, I said, these guys are going to look bad for the first 3 weeks or so, because this is a whole new rationale of why they're warming up. I'm kind of almost changing the landscape of what they think a warm-up is a lot of times. A lot of them just want to get in, go through the motions. Oh, I got a sweat going, let's go. And now I'm actually trying to make these mechanical changes. In about 3 to 4 weeks, it starts to come together. And the beautiful part is I start having better ranges of motion through the hip in our quadruped series, our straight leg series, or even in our walking dynamic warm-ups, you'll see an element of extension in their first step out of their 40. They're able to get that hip split better. They're able to then get better hip extension on the vertical jump, broad jump actions. And so those are all the types of things that almost kind of concurrently blend together over time. Absolutely. So that's kind of my screen, if you will, in the eradicating process of these injuries. And, I think I had 4 kids that came in with patellofemoral syndrome, and they're all gone now. They have no issues with it. And it's amazing when people start feeling healthier, guess what? Their posture's returned, everything. You can tell when somebody starts feeling better.
And their buy-in goes way up as well.
Buy-in goes up when they're finally pain-free.
No doubt. No doubt. Well, a lot of these injuries are occurring, in the season because they're not able to move efficiently, or they're able to decelerate their body. And I've heard you speak several times on your deceleration program. And, A1, if you haven't seen Loren speak, you need to go do it, because I think you're fantastic with your energy and how you bring just energy to the whole presentation. But you've got some great, steps and a process for teaching deceleration training. Kind of in a nutshell, what should we be looking for as coaches to implement a deceleration training program into our already existing programs?
I think a lot of coaches do a great job of implementing the deceleration component, the eccentric, the isometric in the weight room. I think they do a really good job with that. One thing I always talk about, though, is anytime we have a movement skill, say it's a linear day or even if it's a lateral day, is we're always worried about the overcoming action, okay? Whether it's a crossover step to sprint or it's a side shuffle, we're always concerned with just the locomotion of it happening, but I'm more concerned with how it ends. I'm concerned with the whole thing, but I'm looking for how well they absorb and how well it ends. To me, I always tell my athletes it'd be like me putting you on a bench press and always lowering the bar down to your chest and say, okay, push it up. Lower it down, push it up. Right. It's the same idea. You have to prepare the neuromuscular system to now handle these eccentric loads under high velocities and high force like they're going to see in game time action.
Right.
I think that's one way to do it. I think you have to teach it in the steps, and as they get greater competency of that, then you increase the speed or the need for deceleration. Maybe it's more of a reactive need on deceleration, but you're still trying to hold true to your parameters of alignment. And look, in sports, things happen. We can't control everything. However, if we prepare the neuromuscular system to be able to put on the brakes, I have got to believe as a practitioner, when the lights are on and they are forced to put on the brakes, they've been there many, many times. Mm-hmm. And the said principle, specific adaptations to the imposed demands. Right. So I've prepared it under the planal movements and under the contractile demands. I think that's a great way to do it. And I do believe once the athletes get the speed component down, then I think it's a great way to actually work on their conditioning. Sure. Again, I'm not just a linear conditioning guy. We're going to run our 300s. We're going to run this. I have my days of that, no doubt. But I also need to prepare the neuromuscular system for how it's going to be challenged on game day. Right. It's going to be challenged in a decelerative need. So if I haven't prepared the body for that, how the heck am I going to think that it's going to be able to put on the brakes when it has to under fatigue?
Right, right. Well, the challenge with that is everybody's a little bit different, right? And when you're in a more of a performance enhancement type of situation, it might be a little bit more one-on-one. How do you do that in a group setting with various levels of skills and abilities?
So it's actually perfect. So my NFL group is usually about 20 to 30 deep in the off season.
That's right.
My combine group currently is about 15 to 20 deep, depending on the day. And so I do have large groups as well. I mean, obviously I don't have the groups that most of the high school strength coaches have, but we implement a lot of our movement at local high schools. Mm-hmm. And so what we do, coach, is Stephen Pliss told me, to be a better specialist, you need to be a better generalist. And I really didn't understand. He kept saying that when we would lecture together. And it sounded really cool, but I wasn't really sure what he meant. And really what he meant was to be really good in this field and to have a niche. The more I understand the general subject matters that make up our field, whether it's the biomechanics, the biochemistry, the anatomy, the physiology, the programming and planning, the more I understand those general subjects, the better of a specialist I can become. Absolutely. In designing programs for all these different types of individuals. So I looked at movement the same way. I said, you know what, if I look at movement simplistically, I said, okay, there's acceleration, there's deceleration, there's frontal plane and transverse plane movements. If I can master these simple things and learn how to blend them, I can make a practitioner, whether it's a defensive back or running back, through these general movement patterns. Great point. Hey, I'm going to make you the best vehicle possible. Now you go to your sport coach, you go to your position coach, and he's going to make you the best position possible. Yeah. So I'm arming them with the coordinative abilities and tools and the body awareness like we spoke about earlier. And now they get to their pit crew at the position, man, and I'm just handing them one hell of a vehicle. Right. Now it's up to them now to help teach the driver.
No, that's fantastic. That's a fantastic way of looking at it as well. When you go and you see, obviously you just got back from the NFL Combine, you had your class, did fantastic, but when you're there, you see a variety of different ways of training. You see a variety of different ways of implementing the same things that you're doing. What were some of the good and the bad things that could have stood out to you, just in generalizations? I mean, not necessarily judging anybody, but just generalizations in terms of things that you see people doing really well and some things that maybe people need to be doing a little bit better.
You know what? I'd say across the board, I saw a lot of really good this year. It looked like a lot of the kids were prepared and knew exactly what was expected of them. And to be honest with you, I kind of walked away kind of scratching my head a little bit, and I was talking to a few different practitioners because, I think sometimes when you look at the model of the 40, you have to throw out some typical things that you understand about running. Right. And the thing that kind of blows me away sometimes is how erratic some of the movement patterns are and how aggressive they are, but some guys are still throwing up amazing times. Mm-hmm. And so, I think, a lot of us come from a track and field background where it's fluidity, it's relax, it's attack and relax. And I think that was really the thing that indicated to me, okay, that you have to understand that there's a technical model when it comes to sprinting. And then there's also a model that's got to fit like the 40 confines. And there's a model that has to fit the position-specific confines. And so I think that was the one thing I walked away going, wow, it's amazing. Whether the kids that were running fast, who were erratic and tight and all these things that we tell people not to do, could they have run faster if they were a little bit more relaxed or calm? Or is it such a short race that you just attack?
Right.
And that's the question that you have to ask yourself and battle back and forth. And at the end of the day, I think it comes down to the individual. I think there's some people that can just, they've got so much horsepower and they can accelerate for so long and it can be aggressive and, snot going everywhere. Then there's some other guys that just have to be smooth and fluid to get their best time.
Right.
So to me, it's kind of cool just to see the different signatures of running and the different movement patterns. I will say this. Here's the one thing I will say if I walked away and said, I was really disappointed. When it came to the on-field position work, I saw so many kids out of position.
Yeah.
I saw so many kids slipping and sliding. And one thing I always tell my guys is, look, in most of these on-field drills, there's not a watch. What they're looking for is your fluidity of transition. How well can you bend? How well can you get out of a break without further waste?
Right.
Well, a lot of these kids go back to that real aggressive kind of model that we just talked about, and they're fighting themselves and they're hurting themselves against air.
Yep.
They're not against the live body. They're against air, and they can't hold position. They can't hold their footing. And to me, that's a problem.
Absolutely.
And I think as coaches, we have to do a really good job of saying, okay, we want you to do these drills, the 5-10-5 and the L drill in these certain ways and these certain steps, but also understand that those weight distributions and those angles that we set up for those drills, they have carryover to the on-field work. You just have to show them why and where and how.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, and I think it brings up a great point with just this time of year, because I love this time of year when you get to see so many great ideas and things. But the reality is, it's like you said. I mean, you get guys for 6 to 8 weeks, and how much of it is just purely getting them healthy and doing basic skill acquisition of going through the test and learning the test and ways to run it and do it properly. But what you do, and what I think so many other great performance coaches are doing and strength coaches are doing, getting their guys ready, is that from the draft, they're going to walk right into a mini camp and they got to go. They got to be in shape, they got to be prepared, they got to be movement efficient, and they're not going to make the squad if they don't. It doesn't matter how fast they run if they can't move on the football field. And so, making sure that that's an active part of your programming is paramount for sure.
Absolutely.
You're leaving right now, after later on the day to go to a big fight, and you've gotten in MMA lately and we're still on the Ultimate Fighter and the whole deal. Kind of how did that relationship all come about? And it wasn't something like, all of a sudden you look at you and you say, oh, this is this great fighter, right? But the MMA community has really responded to you and the way that you do things, and kind of go into that relationship, how that came about.
It was really funny. It was one of my former football players who had done his pro day, and I was his coach for his pro day training. He went and had a mini camp with the Buffalo Bills. Didn't make it, and the writing was on the wall that maybe he wasn't going to be a pro football player. And so he started diving into boxing and jiu-jitsu and wrestling and really wanted to go this MMA route. Well, here's a kid who's got 8 years of good strength and power work in the weight room, right?
Right.
So he's big, strong, he's a heavyweight, and he's got a unique ability with the power that he has. So he goes in and he starts fighting MMA, has a lot of success. Long story short, he gets the opportunity to be on The Ultimate Fighter, and he goes out and has great success. And he came up to me and said, hey, I don't know if you know this, but I'm doing MMA. Would love to hire you as my strength coach. What do you think? I said, boom, absolutely. I said, however, I don't know one darn thing about the sport. I know it's pretty intense, no doubt. So what I start doing is I start doing kind of like what we do, right? We go to practices and we sport model. We look at the intensities of practice, the duration of practice. What is practice about? Well, I had to do that with all of his disciplines to best sit there and say, okay, as a strength coach, if he's with me 3 days a week and he has 16 sessions a week, or he has 16 practices a week and I'm 3 of them,
right?
Chances are maybe what I should do is give him what he's not getting.
Right.
He's already getting a ton of metabolic work.
Yep.
So I start doing a lot of speed development and just pure strength work, coach, and giving these guys that little X factor that they weren't getting in everything else they were doing. And so from there, he started to have a lot of success, and I got the buy-in from a lot of his other teammates. It was so different from anything they had ever done. Everything they had done before was more CrossFit, more boot camp, it was just more metabolic. It was more of the same.
Right.
And so I wanted to make sure that when my guys hit you, you were going to feel it. I wanted to make sure that when we were lating around and we got into clinch positions, you could feel how strong my guy was.
Right.
And so what I had to do is start blending with what I saw all the other coaches doing from an energetic standpoint and sit there and say, what are they missing? And now a couple things I did find that were a shock to me. I would go to the sparring sessions. And sparring sessions kind of start the same. You kind of match up with a buddy of yours. You kind of know their tendencies. You know their strategy. And so there's an adrenaline factor that's not there. Just isn't. You know this guy.
Right.
And then what I noticed, too, is there was a lot of point sparring. There was a lot of kind of touch, and, let me fix my shin guard, and, nice and easy touch. Well, I was like, where's the grappling? Where's the hard stuff?
Right.
Where's the stuff that really exhausts you? And a couple things I noticed is, first and second rounds, a lot of these guys were kind of warming up, if you will. And it was by the third round, they were opening up.
Yep.
I was like, okay, that's cool. However, you just wasted 10 minutes. And going back to what we know about the SAID principle, if I've trained to be ready in the third round, there's a problem.
Right.
You need to be ready for the first round. So I started to create these, if you will, kind of these metabolic days. I don't try to mimic the round, but what I do try to mimic is what I saw them not getting in practices, and that was more that fast glycolytic energy system.
Yep.
That fast glycolytic, that lactate threshold push, they weren't necessarily getting that in practice. They were working elongated in practice, but they weren't hitting those higher intensities that would take them to those points. So I started creating circuits that, were about, 90 seconds in length, 30, 60, 90 seconds in length. And then depending on what time of year we're at or how close we are to the fight, they either have a 1-to-2 work to rest ratio, a 1-to-1, or then 2-to-1.
Yeah.
And so I would flip it based on the conditioning levels and their ability to withstand their lactate threshold. And so that's where, at first I thought, okay, I'll just do speed power work with these guys. But I noticed that there was something missing at sparring sessions. And that missing is that they can only go so hard in sparring because the likelihood of hurting themselves or their training partners are pretty high.
Right.
So I had to find something that got them out of their comfort level, and I can do it in more of a controlled fashion, smart yet controlled, but hard. And so that's when I started adding in some metabolic days, which at the first I never thought I would.
Yeah, you would think they'd get enough of it for sure.
Yeah, but they just weren't getting those spikes. And again, I always talk to my fighters is we need to make sure that we have power late in rounds, and then we have strength and power late in rounds. That's what matters to me. Because of that, I'll put in some quantifiable variables. I'll put in a vertical jump after they've had their recovery after a hard push, and I want to see what our power component's doing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different things I'll do. I'll use watts readings. I'll use miles per hour readings on like a forced treadmill. Different things like that to give me an idea of how sustained our power is.
Oh, that's good. That's good stuff. Well, with that, you've been able to form obviously a very unique clientele, just in MMA and professional sport and collegiate sport and things along those lines. And not everybody listening to this is a college or pro strength coach. What are some of the ways that you've gone about just, obviously you're extremely personable and you can't do that without, having some sort of being an extrovert and going out there. But, what are some things that you've done that you feel like really helped your business in developing such a unique clientele?
I'd say the number one thing I've done being in the private sector is I've stayed consistent. And what I mean by that is I've been in this industry for, I'm going to do the math real quick, for almost 19 years. And I have never moved out of a 2-mile radius of where I'm currently at. Never. And I think that's a big deal.
Sure.
Because we see trainers, we see coaches come and go. And I am now training kids of their parents who I trained when they played pro sports back in the day.
Yeah.
Now I'm training their kids when I remember when those kids were born.
Right. That's awesome.
And so I think that was the biggest thing is I dug my heels down in the ground and I said, here's where home's going to be. And I just created, my referral source, if you will, just by being consistent. I agree to your point. You have to have this personal aspect. I think the other thing that maybe a young practitioner is you're going to have your high and low days, no doubt. And I always tell my athletes, there's days that we're the hammer and there's days that we're the nail.
Yep.
I said the biggest difference between me And I always tell this to my athletes, and whether they agree or disagree. I said, with me, you'll never know which I am. You'll never know if I'm the hammer or the nail that day, because my persona is going to be the same, regardless. Never get too high with the highs, never get too low with the lows, and stay in that middle ground. And I try to really bleed that over to my athletes, because I think it's important, because we are the consistency cog for them. Athletes wander from the reservation, no doubt. And we have to be able to reel them in. We have to be that consistent backbone for them, that glue that keeps them, one, bought into their training, even though maybe they've been cut twice in the last 3 weeks. Heck, I had one of my major leaguers who was on 5 different teams in the off season. 5 different teams. And he had a great, he just laughed about it. He just laughed about it.
You got to.
And you have to.
Yeah.
It's the nature of pro sports.
Yep.
And so those, to me, I think you have to be consistent. And that consistency will bleed off to your athletes.
I couldn't agree more. And that's regardless if you're in the performance sector or if you're in the collegiate or pro or whatever. It's, you as a strength coach, I always say that you have to be the biggest advocate. You have to always be, rallying behind your athletes. And consistency is obviously one of the things that in a chaotic world, it's something that they crave and they want. And I couldn't agree with you more. We always end these shows with some resources here. Give us the best piece of coaching advice you ever received.
You know what? You've got to be adaptable. I think that's one of the best things that I've heard, and it was recently. I've always believed that I had to be adaptable, but I was able to do a nice interview with Dr. Gene Coleman not too long ago, and he was telling me that one of the first things he was told in this industry is you better be adaptable to any given situation, circumstance, and just know how to audibilize and redirect. So to me, I think that's some of the best advice that I just heard recently that I've known all along.
Sure.
But it was nice to hear it reinforced by someone like Dr. Gene Coleman. So being adaptable.
What about a quote that either you live by or one that you have plastered up there with your athletes?
Probably the most famous. I don't know who I stole it from. I don't know. But when the opportunity of a lifetime presents itself, you have to act within the lifetime of that opportunity. And so that's a pretty profound one right there.
Yeah, that's a great one.
I've got a gal who's fighting, Saturday night for the UFC bantamweight championship belt against Ronda Rousey. And for her, the lifetime of that opportunity is 25 minutes. It's the bout, how long the bout is. For my combine guys, you have my combine pro day guys, you have a 3-hour window to show everything you can possibly show. Make sure if that window is slightly open that you are shoving it up.
Yep.
You are attacking with everything you've got from a character standpoint, from an effort standpoint, from a technical standpoint. Have no regrets.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. That's a great one. What about maybe a book inside strength and conditioning and one outside of strength and conditioning that you recommend?
You know what? There's so many good ones, right? I'd say a book outside of strength and conditioning that I've loved, I've read it probably 3 times now, is The Talent Code.
Yeah, great one.
By Daniel Coyle. I think that's a great book. I think also outside of strength and conditioning, I think some of the Malcolm Gladwell books that make you think a little bit. I like David and Goliath.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
Yeah, loved it. And then within strength and conditioning, you can't go wrong with Super Training by Mel Siff. And I think the revision of Bumpa and Half on periodization is just an awesome read. And there's so many great books to choose from. And I love Zatsiorsky. There's so many darn good reads. It's hard to narrow it down.
That's good. What about an app that you use either for yourself and your own productivity or something we use with your athletes?
You know what? Oddly enough, probably one of the best, most simplistic apps that I tend to use is the CNS Finger Tap app.
Yeah.
I love that with my guys. I love it. Whether it's, giving me an idea of their readiness or their fatigue levels, it gets them buying. They all download it. They all can give me their numbers left and right. And am I charting it? Absolutely. Is it telling me some things? I think so. I think there's a skill acquisition to it as well. And,
sure.
So there's a lot of different elements, but I love that app. Oh, yeah. Their friends' fingers are helping them, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, no question. What about, we're going to link up all your websites and things as well, but, a website that you generally check out, and then talk a little bit about the things you have going on.
I think the NSCA has done a really good job of releasing a lot of the symposiums and a lot of the conferences. So if you're not on the NSCA website checking out, all the different lectures, gosh, I was just on there a couple months ago watching Nick Winkleman on a presentation and Joe Ken. And to me, that's a great resource. I love the NSCA site. I'm in the middle of almost ready to launch within the day. It's called Elite Sports Services, and it's at www.elitesportservices.com. And it's basically a website, an interactive website for coaches to get onto to, one, get content, quick nuggets of information and philosophy. But then I also have courses on there as well. I teach courses, and there's coursework that practitioners can get on, take, and they can get NSCA CEUs for it as well. So it's definitely, I think it's worth checking out.
Yeah, absolutely, man. No, definitely going to check that out. Well, brother, this has been great, man. Tons of great. I got all kinds of notes here. But I appreciate you coming on the show and just the things that you're doing to give back to the community right now. And you're always out there speaking, and I've enjoyed every presentation that I've gone to. So I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and what you're doing for strength coaches around the world out there.
Likewise, Coach. I mean, what you're doing, the information that you're providing for people, and the insights that you're giving them, I mean, hats off to you, and very honored and humbled to be on this.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Good luck in the fight this weekend.
Thank you, sir.
That's it for this episode of Iron Game Chalk Talk. Thanks to this week's guest as well as our sponsors for bringing this episode to you for free. Make sure to check out ronmckeefery.com, where you can join our mailing list, find the show notes, including all the links and resources mentioned, and information about Coach McKeefery's other products. While you are there, please join Coach McKeefery in the comments section thanking our guest for sharing. If you haven't subscribed to Iron Game Chalk Talk on YouTube or iTunes yet, make sure to do so. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome. Coach McKeefery can be found on Twitter at @RMcKeefery, on Facebook and YouTube at /Ron.McKeefery. That's it for this week. Be sure to check back next week for another great episode of Iron Game Chalk Talk.